The first thing you need to do is to divide your A4 page into 5 boxes. Use a ruler and measure all the sides and all the tops of your page where needed to ensure that your boxes are equal and unequal where needed to be. Leave a space to write the day's date. We are working in the style of the illustrator Tim Burton. Tim Burton's style is unique because it is very scratchy and very rough, but it has a lot of character, and there is also still some control and skill in the way that he applies his pencils marks to create a character. The first one I looked at was Robot Boy. I wanted to use Robot Boy as the character head I drew because there's some lovely areas of tone underneath his mouth and at the side of his head. There are times where you're going to need to be careful, and there are times where you might make a mistake and you need to rub it out, but most of the time I want you to be kind of free with your illustration style and try to be loose with your mark making. I next wanted to focus on Stain Boy, but just his head. Now this was good because later on I was going to do another version of Stain Boy, but with his whole body, so I wanted to focus on just focusing on his head and doing a first attempt at a Stain Boy drawing of just the character's head. This is quite simple and it gives you a lot of room around the eyes and the mouth and the nose to do some really good ink and wash techniques later. The next person or the next character I decided to draw was Staring Girl. This was a bit more difficult and you might notice that I've made a few errors and had to go back and correct them, but that is fine because that is what observational drawing sometimes requires. So I would say the best thing to do would be to make sure that you spend a long time focusing on the head. Tim Burton's heads are all very unique because a lot of them aren't similar. A lot of them are very different and quite out there and quite crazy. So make sure you have the shape of the head right before you begin putting in the eyes and the hair and then the mouth. And it's tempting to draw the face first because we all look at people's faces when we talk to them. But actually, if the head size is not the correct shape or size, it will throw off the rest of the drawing, and the rest of the drawing will not look accurate compared to the piece you're copying. Where it comes to the hair, you don't need to add too much detail, so you can see I've only just added a few lines. After that, we move on to the ink. You just need to outline your drawings, and where needed, you might need to add a lot more ink. So for instance, in that specific area, I looked at the original drawing and there was a lot more black on the side of that Robot Boy's skull or his face. Please note, if you add more black to an area, when you go over it with the watercolor brush and water, it will make that area a darker wash. So the more ink you put onto the page, the darker the wash is going to be later. The less ink you put on, the less dark it is going to be. So again, with the hair, I don't need too much details. You're looking at the original Staring Girl. It's quite a rough drawing, so the hair is very rough and scatty. So I don't need to spend ages drawing every individual single strand of hair the way that I can see it. After I finish, I am going to take off the pencil marks with the rubber. Now I'm going to focus on doing a sustained drawing of Stain Boy, and I'm going to include his body. Now I've chosen this character, I should say, because it does have, the legs, the arms, but there's also an interesting drop shadow underneath Stain Boy, which I wanted to kind of replicate with ink and wash. So I started off with the head, the body, the cape, and as you can see, I then move on to the face. Now you're noticing again, the face is coming after I have drawn the head and the shape of the body. That has to be done correctly, because if you don't have a correct shaped head or body, it makes the whole drawing look inaccurate. So you've got to start off with the foundations, the building blocks when we're drawing characters or people, which is the body and which is the face and the head, I should say. Again, with the feet, there isn't much detail in the picture, which you can't really see, but it's off to my right. So I just want to have some very simple shapes for the legs. Now I'm going back over it with a pen, and with this character, you might notice that the pen marks are a lot more rougher. So they're less likely, they're less pen down on the paper, joining a sort of a continuous unbroken line. the more scratchy. I think this suits the original character because of his personality, but also it also looks like the original by Tim Burton. After that, I'm going to work on the ink and wash technique. So you can see only small amounts of water applied to areas that are needed. The area that has a lot more black ink, you might notice it's starting to become much darker than the rest of the areas around. The key with ink and wash is to use the water sparingly and to do less. Less is more. If you put too much water on your brush and you paint too many areas that don't need to be painted, you will notice that the ink starts to become a lot more harder to control. So just remember, little bits of water and you build up the tone. If you add too much water, you will not be able to control the tone and it will spread to areas that are not where you want them to be. If you notice areas are becoming too dark that you've painted, you can also add more water to kind of blend it out into the white paper. So what you don't want to have is you don't want to have the tone unblended to the white paper. It should be a gradual blend. Tone blended into the white paper, a smooth transition. There might be times where you want to add a bit more darkness, so you decide to go over and add more pen. Then you need to add your step by step. So just think back to all the steps that you did to create your ink and wash Tim Burton heads. I've got 5 steps, but you may have more. The title is Pen and Ink Wash, and can you write that in pen, and that will be the end of your task.